Hi everyone, it's Justin from Main Man Bassing. In this video, I'm going to talk about where to find bass, and I just want to explain the high percentage areas you can look for when you're out catching bass. I realize most people fish 1 day a week. You know, they work 5 days. Like maybe they have wife and kids, and or husband and kids, whatever. um, I realize it can be frustrating. So hopefully what I've learned in the last couple of years fishing, what I've studied, what I've learned, can help. So I made this video. I'm gonna go and show screenshots, like to sort of help illustrate what I'm talking about. Um, but I'll just get right into it. Um, Three things you want to think about before I get into charts and diagrams. There's three things: structure, cover, and drop offs. Inclines, declines. The more dramatic, the better. Cover is going to be anything that hides the fish's presence. Grass, that fish can camouflage themselves with bass or camouflage their attack. Structure, any hard surface. Oh, shadows are also a big one too. There's a lot of different cover, but we're talking about mainly about grass and shadows. And then structure, any hard surface. Tires, trees, gravel, boulders, rocks, rock piles, duck pilings. Um, the structure is important because that's how they eat their food. Um, it's probably using structure for a number of different things, but one main thing about structure is that bass eat their food. They do eat food in open water, but a lot of times they're going to bring that food to a hard structure. And if you just YouTube, maybe I'll try and link up one. Um, if you just YouTube feeding my pet bass and search through, so I mean, sometimes you will see them just eat prey in open water, but a lot of times they bring it to something hard in the tank, or they bring it to the corner of the tank, and they spit it out and eat it, spit it out and eat it, spit it out and eat it, and you see because if they attack, say it's a crayfish, if they attack the crayfish on the ground, they're gonna get a bunch of sediment and rocks in their mouth, pebbles and stuff. And so they bring it to a hard surface and they spit it out and eat it, spit it out and eat it, spit it out and eat it. And you see all the rocks and the debris and the dirt coming out of their mouth, and they're probably positioning the fish for the most efficient way for digestion. So hard surface structure is really important. And then with structure and cover, you also want to think about is that structure and cover. If you can get both of them together, that's what you want to look for, is both of them together. But are the structure and cover providing food? Like grass. Like if you go up into a cove that's 3-4 feet deep, 2, 3, 4 feet deep, and you see a bunch of lily pads and grass, usually you're going to see bait fish in there. So it's a source of food. Like that area is the bait fish are using the grass as cover. So it's holding the bass's source of food. And then also like around here in the Northeast we have crayfish, and we have a lot of broken rock in the Northeast New England. It's rocks, about they're not. It's not really gravel, and it's not really boulders. They're just rock piles of rocks this big. Just a haven for crayfish. Crayfish are like crawdads, so smaller crawdads. Um, and so these areas of rock piles are just a massive source of food, crayfish for bass. Um, and a lot of times you'll see, when I'm fishing the rock piles and the rock shores, like here's my boat, I'm on the lake floor, right up here's your incline, and you got your rock piles, and then off to the left is the main lake floor. It's flat, and you'll see perch, white perch. So the bass they've corralled the white perch next to the rock piles, so that now they have white perch to feed on, and they also have the crayfish. So those are just things you want to think about as I jump into the charts and diagrams. So I want to get to that before I bore you to death. All right, so here we go. Thanks. Just one more thing I want to mention. I would really highly advise getting some type of sonar. Doesn't have to be much. I have a hook, Lowrance Hook 7. I'll leave a link for it in the description box. You pick it up on Amazon. It doesn't have to be that, but that's a good unit. Like, I have a small boat, like a 14-foot aluminum boat. It's old. I use a magnetic transducer mount, so I didn't have to drill any more holes into the boat. I'll leave links for that as well. And I'll leave links for a review of the Lowrance hook and how to use a fish finder. Sort of let you know. It took me a year and a half to figure out how to use my fish finder, so it's like a really hard thing to find to figure out how to use. But I'll show you how to use it. There'll be a link for how to set up your frequencies, but you really want to consider that. Like I said, man, if you're fishing one day a week for like 6 hours, you need to make every minute count. And like a fish finder, when I like figured out how to use my fish finder, like instantly my results changed from catching bass. Just catching a lot more bass consistently now. So you really want to consider that. You can get the topographical maps, topo maps for your lake that you fish. Really important though. The topographical maps are really important. But anyways, let me jump into the charts and diagrams now.
So if you look at this cove where the red circle is in the middle lower left, sort of, this cove, there's several coves on this lake. This one produces fish all the time for me. And there's just a couple features I want to talk about. One is that, so there's a lot of vegetation. There's lily pads and there's grass, and then there's like grass beds everywhere. Like just these thick clumps of grass that grow from the bottom all the way up to 20 feet. And it's right near a pretty steep drop off. So, what is why most likely fish, there's a lot of bigger bass there, is because that vegetation, that cover, is going to hold a lot of bait fish. The bait fish are going to be up there hiding in the grass, and the bass, they'll be on the main lake floor where it's darkest blue. They travel up, they feed, they trap the prey, they feed, and then they go back down to deeper water when they're done feeding. So that's the thing you want to look for. Those are some of the things you want to look for when you're fishing coves. Is it near a drop off? Is there a lot of vegetation? Is that vegetation going to hold food sources for the bass? And because if you have like 5 or 6 coves to choose from, you want to spend least amount of time as possible and fish those high percentage areas. So consider that when you're fishing. Now let's look at another cove that's not as successful and doesn't produce as much bass. So this cove, excuse me, this cove, so I've been fishing this will be my 3rd year fishing. But I've been going to this lake since I was an infant. But before I knew what I was really doing fishing, I would go back here. I've never, many years going back there, many hundreds of times, I've never seen a bass in this cove. Ever even seen a bass. I have caught one, and I'll play it for you in the background here. It was next to a laydown. So there are bass in there. I'm just saying, out of hundreds of times, I've never even seen a bass. There's a couple things going on with this cove. One is that it's not near a real deep drop off. And there's a little bit of drop off to the right, but the fish have to travel quite a bit of ways to get there. And there's no vegetation in that cove, so there's not going to be a whole ton of bait fish in there. And it's so shallow. It's like most of it's like a foot deep. So it's so shallow and not being near a drop off that the fish sort of they risk like being attacked by eagles. There's like 5 eagles in the lake, bald eagles, and they really expose themselves. So, and even under the docks, I've pitched the docks, I've never found anything there. So again, it's just something to consider when you don't have much time and you're trying to break down a lake. Like, you want to look for coves with heavy vegetation, structure elements, and near drop-offs. That's just what I've found. It's not that you won't ever catch, like I said, I've caught one bass in here and it was actually a pretty good sized bass, but it's not a high percentage area. All right. So like when you think about bass, you think about shady, grassy coves, right? Probably the next best thing you think about, the next most popular thing you think about are docks. So let's talk about docks real quick. I'll show you a picture. And here is just a video of me in a cove with some really nice drop off and some really nice cover and structure. You got the shade back there, you got the grass, you got the vegetation, you got the trees, the hard structure. And look what I pull up. My little buddy. That was fun. And that was actually, Chris actually hooked into that first, but he got broke off. So then, like, he took forever to tie his lure on again. So I went in and I caught that bass. It should have been Chris's. All right, so when you think about docks provide shade and structure. So the shade of the dock, the bigger the dock, the better. And then boats, doesn't matter. Believe it or not, I've actually caught bass when boats are revving their engine at full speed. So don't worry too much about noise. Typically you want to look for docks that are unoccupied. Nobody's home at the cottage or the business or whatever. But don't be afraid if you see people walking on the dock. Don't be afraid, especially if it's a big dock. But so the red is the shoreline, right? You see this steep drop off. Those contour lines close together means it's super deep. So it's only a matter of like 30 feet before you hit the main lake floor, from like shoreline to lake floor. And in the yellow circles, you see those are points. Those are points running off the shore. So a lot of times bass are going to position on either side of those points. And so the thing about docks is, you might say, well, there's not much vegetation. Well, minnows will lay on the shore, on the sand, like especially if it's calm. And early in the morning, a lot of times you see trout. So trout are going to track the minnows, and then the bass are going to track the trout and the minnows. And a lot of times in the morning, you'll see those trout just swim full speed and just bash those minnows, and then collect the ones that they injured. And a lot of times there's enough grass and enough rocks to hold like snakes, frogs, rodents. So there's enough there. So, but this is a shoreline where I'm typically going to catch a lot of bass. It's got that steep drop off with enough docks on it to hold the bass. And then there's contour points. There's points. So something you want to think about when you're breaking down a lake in a topo map. So now I'll show you a shoreline with docks that I've never even seen a bass. Also, I just want to mention, as you can see in the video, when you're fishing docks, if it's possible, you want to get your dock as close to land as possible and bring that lure parallel to the shoreline or uphill. So you want to cast out the deeper water and bring it up shallow, or parallel it as much as possible. You can put your boat in front of a dock and pitch out to it, but when the fish aren't biting, go ahead and move your boat as close to land as you can get. Obviously, if there are people swimming by there, don't bother. But if it's unoccupied, if the area is unoccupied, go ahead and bring your boat as close to land as you can. Park it on the land if you have to. So this shoreline, I have never seen or caught a bass, and I've fished it a lot. It's just not enough drop off. Like, that's what I think it is. And again, that's not to say if I fished it for the rest of my life I wouldn't catch a bass. I'm just saying most of the time it's just not going to hold a bass, and I think it's because there's not much of a drop off next to it. There's like no real vegetation. I don't think there are that many rocks either. There probably are minnows up there, but there's no like steep drop off for them. So let me show you. I want to show you one more example of dock fishing where I haven't caught bass, and I'll show you why. Hold on. All right, so this cove, you can see the red circle. Have never seen a bass. Never caught a bass. I just don't think there is vegetation in there, and but I just don't think there's a steep enough contour for the bass to consistently go up there and feed. Again, they think they have to watch out for prey. They have to watch out for eagles, other fish that can attack them. However, if you look at the yellow circle right next to it, right where you get those contour lines close together and you get a steeper drop off, that's where I've caught bass. So, again, it's not to say that in the red circle, I'm never going to catch a fish there. It just doesn't happen that often. But when you get closer, when you fish the docks closer to the drop-offs, that's where you get results. Okay, so just consider all that when you're fishing. If you're going to fish docks, look for the drop-offs. Look for the docks next to real steep drop-offs, okay? And it doesn't matter if there's vegetation in there or not, because a lot of times the minnows will be up like, in like a half inch of water if it's calm, and those trout are watching the minnows, and the trout come up and bash the minnows, and then the bass are watching the trout and probably the minnows too, but specifically the trout. So just keep that in mind. All right, now we'll go on to humps in the middle of the lake. Also, before I forget, when you're fishing like coves or docks and you don't see them under the docks or up high or up, shallow, go to where the contour lines are the closest, possibly where there's a point. You see a little point off the lower right edge of the yellow circle, and use your sonar, your fish finder, and look for them deeper. That's the other thing too. Is like they might not be up in that dock, up shallow in the dock, but if you just follow those contour lines where they're real close together and real steep, and just keep an eye on your sonar and look for structure and cover out in deeper water, grass beds, weed edges, tires, like boats that have been sunk, any like trees, because a lot of times in the winter, like up here, trees will fall over in the winter, and as the ice shrinks, it'll pull that tree all the way out. I mean, I've seen trees like 100 feet offshore. So again, if they're not up shallow, look for the tightest contour lines and the points, and go all the way out to the main lake floor looking on your sonar. Here's a hump in the middle of the lake. You can see on the right and left there is the main lake floor. All the way to the right is an island, and all the way to the left is the main shore. And in the middle you have a hump. Now this hump is not visible. You need your sonar to see it. And in the 2 years I've fished on a boat, I've never seen anyone fishing a hump in the middle of the lake. I've only seen them on rock piles that you can see with your eye. I've never seen anybody offshore on a hump. Never, not once. So that's good, because that means the fish that are there are most likely not used to seeing artificial lures. But anyways, what you want to do is you really need your sonar for this. You really want to comb it thoroughly. Look for the points like on the lower right edge of the circle. You see like a point running out. But you can just take your time, comb the whole thing with your sonar, and mark off structure and cover. Any rocks, grass, and especially when there's a boulder in grass, you want to look at that. And also don't be afraid to go on that main lake floor. A lot of times what I've seen is bass will push bait fish towards this hump, and then they'll be holding on their structure. Like here's an image. You can see the bass, the arc, and then it's hard to see on the middle screen, the sonar screen, the 2D sonar. But if you look to the right screen, you'll see that's the down scan. You can see the rocks on the bottom, right where the fish is between the rocks. So the fish is holding to that structure, and you can't see it, but there's a ball of bait fish, probably minnows, that the fish have pushed off there, and so that the bass have pushed towards this hump. So don't be afraid to go a little further out. You know, it might not. And actually, the bass I've caught and the bass I see on radar are sort of like closer. They're either on the incline or they're on the main lake floor, close to that hump, holding to rock. So don't be afraid to go a little further out. All right, and your drop shot is pretty effective because that's like usually 30-40 feet. So you need something that gets down there quick. But you want to position your boat at higher elevation. So you want to be uphill, cast to deeper water, and then bring that lure up the hill. All right. So I talked earlier about rock piles, small broken rocks, providing, that's crayfish habitation. So you get a plentiful source of crayfish in those broken rocks. And in the red circle, that's all broken rock. I know I fished there, for a long time. So off to the right you have Treasure Island, and then in that red circle you got steep drop-offs. There's broken rock. So you get a tremendous amount of crayfish. And that whole stretch is all good, man. You can see in the video, I've, you just go up and down that red circle and catch bass in 30-40 feet. And then, so not only do you have the crayfish and the contours, but once you get to that main lake floor where it's all blue, the bass have, I don't know if the bass have pushed them there, but there's white perch there as well. So it's another type of bait fish that the bass can feed on. There's schools of white perch, and then there's minnows too. That minnow balls that the bass push out right against those contour lines, right where they start. So it's all about the drop off, the inclines. It's where bass are going to push bait fish and hold them, and that's where a lot of times there's going to be crayfish and crawdads. So don't, like I said earlier, it's really rare that I see someone in more than 10 feet of water fishing. It's just really rare. So, what I find is that when you find these inclines and these steeper drop-offs, you're going to, the bass are going to be pretty aggressive because they haven't seen artificial lures. Another thing you can look for, are like natural funnels. So like this isn't a cove, like on the top right corner, that's actually open water. It extends to the other side of the lake, but you can see with the contour, like the bass will push bait fish into like the corner, like right in almost the middle of the red circle. You can see where it's the deepest. They've pushed those bait fish. They're almost like trapped because they're above the bait. The bass are above the bait fish, and like to the left side of the red circle, you see where it's the darkest blue. They're there, and they just hold them there. Like the bait fish can't go anywhere, so the bass are just going to hold them there. So you can look for these like natural like funnels, where bait fish can be trapped up against. And don't forget, the bass can always trap them by hovering over them. And then the bass they block off their deep escape. You can see like the bass, if you look at the very left edge of the circle, the red circle, and the bass will position there and just block their escape. and just hold the bait fish there and just pick them off and feed on them. So you want to look for those like natural funnels, those natural traps, and always fish uphill. And then look for grass and structure on your sonar and fish that, or throw your bait into the bait ball, the minnow ball that you see on your sonar. On this picture, so you have a shoreline with a pretty steep drop off. I'd like those contour points to be a little closer together, but whatever, it works. But where the yellow is all kinds of vegetation, plants, like plants that are like 15 feet, like from the ground of the lake all the way up to the surface. And you can see in the picture here, you catch pretty good sized bass. So again, you want to position your boat up higher, cast into deeper water, and bring it up. And you're looking for contours, inclines, going uphill, and you're looking for structure and cover. And within that cover of the grass, of the vegetation, there's probably structure that I couldn't see. If you feel a rock when you're pulling your lure up the hill, like if it's a drop shot and you feel a rock, keep it there, because that bass wants to come up and eat the food and then spit it out on that rock. That's how it's going to eat the food. And then, I think this is my last picture, but this is sort of like a cove or shoreline. It's got a bit of a natural trap to it, a natural funnel. You can see in the red circle, the bass can come from the blue water, push the bait fish, and trap them in those that pit, that drop off in the very middle of the red circle. But if you look in the yellow circle, that's a point. And you can see on the images that I put, that's where I found pretty good sized smallmouth. It's probably a healthy 2.5 pounds, maybe 3, I don't know. But it was like 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds, but it was right off that point. So you're looking for drop offs with points. Anyways, I think that's my last picture.
So that's it. That's the video. I think, I'm not a fishing pro, but I've definitely made. I can, even on new lakes, I can usually break them down pretty quickly, and at least catch a couple of bass. Sometimes, it happens like everything I explained to you might not work, but I think usually, and the more time you spend in those areas, you're gonna. If you look for those, you might not find the bass initially, but I think you'll see over time that these tips are going to help you. And if you just keep thinking about them, keep them in the back of your mind before you go fishing, where to look, I think it's going to help a lot. I hope it helps. Let me know if it helps. Anyways, that's the review, or not the review, but sort of the lesson, demonstration, or whatever video. But thanks for watching.